Hello and welcome to the 11th bonus video in the 20 years of MCF celebration. I'm MCFPapa. In this video I'll be reviewing Submerged, the third entry in the Blackpool Mysteries series published by Harlequin, who also have published Fa La 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 Faking It, Her Fake Wedding Date in Sicily, and Amish Witness to Murder. I wonder how real Amish people feel about having so many novels written about them. They probably aren't too pleased. Submerged feels quite different from the previous two books in the series. For one, there isn't any mention of Ravenhurst or the MCF agency this time, when Stolen and Vanished name-dropped them multiple times. Molly briefly mentions her uncle, but unlike the last two books, she doesn't say he works for the MCF agency, just that he's a detective. I guess at this point Mel Odom felt that he had already done enough to connect them to the games and didn't need to have a bunch of tie-ins this time. I'll just have to see if Unearthed has a similar lack of game references in it. That being said, there is a kind of implicit connection to the games, where they frequently mention the tall cliffs near Blackpool, and we see plenty of that in the Ravenhurst games. There also didn't seem to be nearly as many real-world brands in this book. At one point, Michael and Molly have a second breakfast, which reminded me of The Lord of the Rings, but I don't think it was really meant as a reference, just that they wanted to get back together and chat more. And also, Michael, as a video game developer, says he's designing a game called Dead Space. I don't think this is meant to be referencing EA's 2008 horror game, but then again, Dead Space 2 came out just a few months before this book released, so maybe it was something fresh on Mel Odom's mind as he was writing it. Michael also later thinks of making a game called Submerged. Get it? Like the book's title? The earlier entries took a while to get into things, but this book wastes no time setting up the murder. Molly has found a dead body from the very first chapter. It was Clark Partridge who died, and it was thanks to the Graham's investigation that the body was even identified as Clark. The police had trouble figuring out who the corpse was because they couldn't use dental records due to Clark's horrible teeth. Can you believe it? A British person who has bad teeth. Imagine that. There is a treasure in this story, but it's a lot more modern this time. Molly has gotten a grant for funding renovations along the town's harbor. However, one of the council members stole from the grant fund because his daughter Rosamund has been kidnapped by Clark, and he needed to use the money to pay the ransom. So the question becomes who was working with Clark and what happened to the money, which we find out over the course of the book. However, a lot of time in this book is spent on the grant plotline itself, where there are many people in Blackpool that are opposed to the grant for various reasons, such as potential environmental damage from the construction crews rebuilding everything, and some of the store owners will have to pay a lot out of their own pocket for these renovations. There are also a ton of new characters introduced related to this plotline, but I found it to be quite a bit more boring compared to the earlier two stories, because just a lot of financial talk isn't that exciting to me, and having so much of this means that there wasn't as much focus on the mystery itself in this book. Something else different is the lack of Michael as a protagonist in the book. While in Stolen and Vanished, it felt like Michael and Molly had roughly equal amounts of page time focused on him. In Submerged, it feels more like 80% Molly and 20% Michael. Michael will still show up in some of Molly's chapters, but he's mostly off doing his own thing. Michael, along with his Jamaican friend Rohan, are searching for the gypsy treasure Charles Crow stole from Eastern Europe centuries ago. Some new characters introduced here are the Drugheses, a gypsy family in Blackpool looking for this treasure before Michael or someone else finds it, because they believe it's their inheritance by right. And so I like that the treasure that was introduced in Vanished got a bit of a follow-up here. And while doing renovations along the wharf, the dredging crew found a centuries-old ship, so a big chunk of Michael's chapters is exploring and learning more about the sunken ship itself. I was kind of correct in my prediction last time that there would be pirates in this book, but it wasn't pirates in the way I was expecting. The sunken ship known as the Seaclips was a slave ship, and even though the UK had outlawed anything to do with slavery, the Seaclips continued hauling slaves to the US for profit, and was thus branded a pirate ship for breaking the law. But it's far more a disgusting sort of piracy than the usual Blackbeard swashbuckling style. And the transatlantic slave trade is probably the darkest horror present in this series, either in the books or the games. The stuff Michael does in this book is pretty interesting, but it has nothing at all to do with the Grant Money mystery. There is some connection between the Seaclips and Charles Crow's treasure, but the kicker is that this book doesn't explain what that connection is really at all. While the murder of Clark plotline gets resolved in this story, the book ends on a big cliffhanger with many unanswered questions about the treasure that I assume will be resolved in Unearthed, the final book of the series. Stolen and Vanished were pretty much self-contained stories, but now for the third book, all of a sudden there's a big focus on continuity. And so once I know the conclusion of the series, I might like this book more, but for now I'd say that Submerged is the weakest of the Blackpool Mysteries. But we'll just have to see what I think in the next book review when I review Unearthed. But until then, like and subscribe if you want, and I'll see you tomorrow for the next bonus video.